Nice to meet you.
Hi, sorry, let me
Uh,
close the door real quick.
no. Hi, Angie. So many okay. Catherine. Hi.
Hi,
Elia's here.
everyone.
Hudson. I know it's early for you guys there.
Not that early, it's 2, so it's okay. It's good.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think Hudson and Sarah might be quite early for them. Hi, Ronya,
Hey, Rania.
Riddhi,
Hi.
Andrea, Ignacio. I think we'll just wait for a minute, maybe, Najing, before we start.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, this is great. Hello, Chris.
Hi there. Good morning.
Morning. Okay. Aries, where are you at the moment?
I am in Switzerland, actually.
Oh, you're in Switzerland.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I'm graduating tomorrow and the graduating party's tomorrow, so I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Which school was that in Switzerland?
It's the Lyceum Alpinum in Zutz.
Yeah. Yeah.
Olivia, where?
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I haven't seen quite a few of you for a while, and some of you I see every day. So it's a pleasure to get all of you here together. Today's quite a special webinar. I think it's our first one after our graduation. So it's the first webinar that we're having after we completed our maiden journey around the world. And in a fitting manner, we're calling it Reflections and Results. And we're going to talk about reflections and results both through Chris's eyes and his experience of seeing the cohort most of the way through the year in every place he went. And then he gave a very inspiring speech at graduation. We talk a bit about that. And then obviously through Olivia's eyes. And Olivia is one of my all-time favorite students. And I don't say that lightly. I've had many students in my past, and she's a real star in many different ways as a person and as a student. She's a very talented documentary filmmaker. Please follow her YouTube. Olivia, go ahead and post your YouTube channel in the chat. And she went to UWC Mostar, where she did her IB. She was then a Baret Scholar, and she'll be going to Duke in the fall. So today I wanted to start maybe at the end. So we're going to start with graduation. And I wanted to kind of throw it over to Chris here to give his reflections on Chris, what did you see at graduation that really stood out to you that maybe was maybe an unexpected or unintended consequence of the program? What was surprising to you about Baret at graduation?
We graduated 30 days ago underneath the Great Wall in the mountains north of Beijing. And Farhad, what surprised me in such a positive way is how tightly the students had become bound together during this course of the year. And we expected that, but the extent of it was beyond, I think, our expectations and their expectations. And I believe it's two things that cause that. One is length of program matters. And you've all been involved in 2-week programs or 3-week programs. There's not time in those types of projects to really get to know people, and this stretching over an entire academic year, I think it had a lot to do with the bonding that occurred. And the second thing I think that also caused that is this is an intense experience. It's coming at you very fast across so many cultures, and that shared experience is a big part the bonding. The third thing I would say that surprised me about graduation is how our students were already planning in significant ways to be together in the months and years following graduation. And remarkably, many students immediately following graduation went off and did further travels together across the world. We elected our Alumni Association board, and there are groups of students that are going to be around New York next year, groups of students in Delhi, groups of students in Sao Paulo, where Guilherme is joining us from. And so they were already planning how they're staying together.
Olivia, do you want to add to that? What do you think, not just what stood out, but like, what do you think formed the glue that kind of brought students together so much? Because I share that finding, Chris. I mean, when I was talking to all of you, all of the students at graduation, you were talking about the places that you went, which we thought was going to be the main topic of conversation. But actually, the main topic of conversation was each other. And I found that to be a really fascinating finding. Could you say a little bit about why you think that happened?
I think I completely agree with what Chris has mentioned. The length of the program is something that really facilitates this bonding with people. You don't always find the opportunity of living the 24 hours of every day for over 9 months with people your age, with people with similar interests, with people who are eager to explore and make the most of these experiences that we find throughout the year. And I think something as well very interesting now that everyone, all of the people who graduated, even fellows as well, are dealing with all these feelings of after graduation. You arrive back home, and it's true that you start having very interesting conversations, but it's true that a little part of yourself has this feeling of no one can truly understand what is it that we've experienced during these 9 months, because it generally is a unique experience. So you really look forward to seeing again the people who share this experience with you, and the people who know how it feels like to randomly one day wake up in the Amazon rainforest to continue your adventure and start walking around the streets of Paris, or to explore the city of Istanbul. So I think that for sure, this feeling of maybe now that I'm back home, I don't have my Baret people, I cannot fully share these feelings with someone. So there's this connection that that 100 students across the globe perfectly understand what is it that you've lived.
Yeah, that's very touching. I agree. And Chris, staying with graduation for another few minutes, could you tell us a little bit about like the because we had a kind of an evening or a couple of evenings where students presented some of their capstone projects that they had been working on, and there was a talent show which was entertaining, of which you were a judge. But could you say a little bit about some of the projects that kind of stood out to you?
There's so many. One student wrote and finished her first novel during the year. Another student produced, and having been in book publishing and magazine publishing before, an absolutely world-class art book that she did during the entire Baret year, and she actually published and printed it for graduation. A number of students did documentary films that are posted in various places and captured their year. Over 15 students completed very in-depth business plans of companies and NGOs that they plan to start during their college years. One of our students just received a $100,000 investment in their idea from Yale University's endowment fund. And so these are not just theories, they're actually happening. There were books of poetry, It was quite an amazing week. And part of graduation is what we called open mic. And we had several hours of open mic across days where students could share anything they wanted. And that's where you began to see these different projects.
Yeah. And there was obviously an album of music made by Ali, who learned kind of a new instrument in every region, and I think played some of that at graduation as well. Talking about documentaries that some of the students made, let's go to Olivia, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about the documentaries that you made over the year, and why were you doing that?
Okay, so like Farhad has mentioned, I have a YouTube channel, and my capstone project throughout the year was making these short documentaries, film documentaries. And I think for me, what really inspired me throughout the year was starting to experience in daily conversations that would happen, noticing that some of my preconceived ideas or some perspectives I previously had were changing, and were changing just by talking with people, by getting to know people's stories. So I thought, let me share these stories with a wider audience. And that's why I started making these documentaries. The first one was in the Amazon with the Amazon Fellowship. And I think in this specific one, I remember how I felt the first time we arrived to the first Indigenous community that received us. It was a bit of an uncomfortable feeling. I was like, what is happening? I thought like the performances and everything, I wasn't too sure what our role as tourists was, yes. So
Yeah.
talking with them, having conversations with them, there was a language barrier, but still seeing how you can communicate with people and seeing how much daily conversations and these unique experiences can change your notion on things. I got to later know how tourism has started as a new source of sustainable income for these indigenous communities that previously relied on multinational corporations that were just taking out the timber and the trees of their jungle. This is just a very small example, but it was this motivation of, I see how much these conversations and getting to know these people across the world is changing me. I want to share these messages with a wider audience.
And I mean, I think I have plenty of questions from there. And then Olivia and I have lots of conversations about these topics. But before we go deeper into this one, I'd like to zoom out just for a second and ask Olivia, not about her trip, but I want to know where you went over this 1 year. What were all the locations you went?
So we started in New Hampshire. That's where we had our orientation week. Then I was in New York City. I stayed there, both the home base city and my fellowship. Then moved to Sao Paulo. Also visited Rio de Janeiro while I was in Brazil. Then went to the Amazon rainforest, Manaus. Continued in Paris. Visited Palermo for my fellowship. We had winter break and we continued our Baret program in Istanbul. I was in Antalya, in the coast of Turkey. Continued the trip in Kenya, where I was able to see not only Nairobi, but also the coast of Kenya and some rural villages in the country. Then spent 10 days in Kruger National Park in South Africa, also Johannesburg. Moved to Delhi to continue with the program. Also visited Agra and Jaipur. In Sri Lanka, visited Beijing for our last home base city. Visited as well Tianjin with the fellowship, and also Jeju Island in South Korea. And then our graduation week was right next to the Great Wall of China.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah. Wow. And before you started this journey, Olivia, did you know what you were interested in? Did you know what you wanted to pursue in university?
I wasn't. So I really saw Baret as the opportunity to explore all the things that till this point I had not had the time to fully explore. So I really stayed with an open mind. And it's true that also with this interest of people and everything, I've always been super interested in international relations, political science, and that's what I thought I was going to be primarily studying in university. But with Baret, with the fellowships and also afternoon options, conversations with people, or just exploring the countries we were in, I've really connected with the environmental part of myself. And now something that I was not expecting to do, but one of my majors in university is going to be environmental policy, which is something that before Baret, I didn't know it was going to be such a strong passion of mine. But all these experiences have really allowed me to explore things that I didn't know before. And I think that's very, very special.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is that you had an idea beforehand of what you liked, and Baret wasn't a finding of a particular idea, but it was an exploring of maybe ideas on the periphery that are always
Completely.
really interesting. Chris, were you going to jump in?
I know, I was listening.
Are you listening?
Okay.
But Olivia, did you apply to universities before you came to Baret?
Yes, and I actually applied to Duke as well before coming to Baret, and they waitlisted me. And what I decided to do, I knew I was gonna go to Baret, because when you're in the waitlist, you don't know if you're gonna, you never know what's gonna happen, and they can tell you in August. So at that point, I already knew I was gonna do Baret and I was gonna join this program. So I decided to send them a letter and explaining what Baret was, what I was gonna be doing this year. And then I just send a small message like, you're gonna find my application next year and you're gonna see how this experience has made me a more valuable contribution to this university. And it ended up working out. But I think my applications before and after Baret have been very, very different. Before and during Baret. It's just, I read the essays that I wrote for the many applications that I sent before Baret, and I read the essays that I wrote this year, and I can see in those words the shift, the certainty, the being more sure, and also being able as well to share with the essays all the amazing lived experiences or this change of perspectives that I've mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, going into because I mean, I think, you know, for a college applicant, I mean, the Baret works in so many different ways. One of the ways in which it kind of shows itself would be in these application essays. It's not the only place, I think, like, you know, it shows itself also in your own personality and in who you become. But the college application, at least the US college applications, are a presentation or a representation of who you are in that moment, especially in those essays. Could you tell us a little bit about which essays you think, you know, you were working on that in which Baret kind of, or an experience from your year with us made itself shown? And yeah.
Yes, I think one of the essays that I had to write for Duke University really shows what these universities are looking for and why Baret is such a perfect thing to be able to contribute to the university with these things. One of the essays that I had to write for Duke, for example, the prompt was, we believe a wide range of viewpoints, beliefs, and lived experiences are essential to making Duke a vibrant and meaningful learning community. I think just with that sentence, what we've been talking about throughout this webinar so far, changes of perspectives, lived experiences. One of the things that we would always say as scholars in Baret was, how do you fit so many once in a lifetime experiences in 9 months? So, and then what the question was asking, feel free to share with us anything in this context that might help us better understand you and what you might bring to our community. So for example, I decided to talk about a bit in depth about the experience in the Amazon rainforest. What were some preconceived ideas that I had before going? The way I was able to interact with the people there, even if they didn't speak Spanish, which is my language, or English. And also what I've mentioned before, how tourism can actually be a reliable source of income. And these notions that we sometimes have on tourism or massified tourism. So I decided my whole essay was just about the fellowship in the Amazon, which is 10 days of the entire 9 months of Baret, just one single little bit. And I could have talked about many more things, but this is just an example of a lived experience that I've had thanks to this program and a change of perspective and of ideas, and how this is something that US universities and other universities, depending on the application, of course, but it is something they're looking for. They want to see these things.
Yeah. Chris, could you reflect a little bit on that as well, on how you see, Baret and college admissions? Because we had great college admissions this year. And maybe, from your experience of, why you think that worked. Because it was the first time colleges were seeing Baret Scholars on an application. And it seemed like they liked what they read, but what are your thoughts?
First of all, I've had the privilege of starting schools around the world, including New York City's now largest private school, which is called Avenues, which has 2,000 students today. And so I have seen many college admissions processes over my career, and Baret was a remarkable one. And part of that is what you see in just the results. And our students this coming fall are attending incredible universities and colleges around the globe, and we worked all the way through the year with each of them. By the way, some of our students had already been admitted to college and were deferring and going to the same place they had been admitted. Others had been admitted, but were trying to go to other colleges that they might like better, and so they were applying during the year. And then some of our students knew they were going to take a gap year and didn't do their applications until part of Baret. So we had all three groups. Just some stories from that, and it's similar, Olivia, to the one you just told. One of our students applied last year to NYU Film School in New York, and they didn't get in. This year, I remember one day, I forget which city it was in, I heard this big scream.
It was in Delhi.
I think it was in Delhi. And not only did they get into NYU Film School, but they got a full 4-year ride scholarship to NYU. And in addition to that, they received an internship with a producer and director that they had actually met during the morning program in New York City. That's just a small story, but others, students have been admitted to great liberal arts colleges, example, Middlebury, to Ivy Leagues from Brown to Columbia, University of Chicago, which is so well regarded, around the world to Sciences Po in Paris, to University College in London, to National University of Singapore, to all three campuses of NYU, NYU in New York, NYU in Abu Dhabi, and NYU in Shanghai, to St. Andrews in the UK. Mm-hmm. So we had and to fashion and art institutes as well around the world. So it was a terrific year, and it was fun to watch as students were receiving results across the world.
And I mean, what do you think, Chris, about what were universities seeing in the kind of in this application? It was
what I'm going to say is not going to surprise anyone. The leading universities of the world and colleges, not only do they understand the value of a year in between, they actually promote it. When you receive your acceptance letter from Harvard University, it encourages you to take a year between high school and college, because they know students arrive better informed about the world, understanding more what they may want to do, and being bigger contributors to their college communities. And universities around the world understand this. Princeton is starting its own gap year. Duke is actually funding gap years. So they view experiences in that in-between year is very important. And Baret, and not to pound our chest, but we're the preeminent program. Most gap year programs are 3 or 4 weeks. They're one region. None span the world in the way we do. So it's hard to imagine how it wouldn't help any CV for college application.
Back to Olivia. I wanted to ask a little bit about how your understanding of environment and law and policy kind of, how it grew over the year with the experiences that you had, because you kept, releasing these little documentaries every couple of months. And I was wondering, like, what were the ideas that you were discovering along the way that you probably wouldn't have picked up from textbooks,
Yes. So there were multiple thoughts, multiple things in my head and in my mind as I traveled around the world. I think probably I've always lived in not super big cities, and there's always been like mountains or just something around. And it's true that this year with Baret was my first time living in bigger cities. So exploring as well that part and seeing the difference between how I was feeling when I was more in the big cities, or maybe when I had the chance of exploring places that were more in nature. Just noticing that I was just that connection with nature. I think the fellowship in the Amazon was one of the first points where I was like, I'm really, really enjoying this. I'm really seeing the value of protecting the environment, are also as well through conversations that we had with the indigenous communities, different perspectives on the way we perceive the environment, the way they saw themselves as part of nature, instead of something, a resource to utilize and that's it. Kind of like this hierarchy of humans, nature, all these things, and exploring these perspectives through people. And then I think when my idea and this desire of I want to do something related with the environment, environmental policy, in this case, analysis and policy, when we had our fellowship in Kruger National Park, we had the chance of meeting Martin, who is the director of African Conservation Experience, the NGO we were working with. And we had lectures every morning, every afternoon, we were learning. And the way he was able to combine race, religion, gender, politics, economics into explaining what's happening at the moment in Kruger National Park. And a very, very clear thought that he shared with us: if there's something you want to protect, you first need to get to know it. And I think having that experience and being able to hear this from a person who spent his life trying to protect the environment, trying to share with other people these learnings from the environment, and promoting this idea as well of seeing ourselves as part of nature and how meaningful and valuable that is, it really made my desire of I want to do something with this stronger.
Yeah. So you started to kind of feel that you couldn't just naively love the environment, that there is that kind of attitude, but like true care comes from knowing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and from naming is what we were talking about
Yes.
earlier, the ability to be able to add that. I mean, when I heard Olivia talk about some of these ideas at graduation, I was shocked because these were thoughts that I had maybe in my early 30s, things that I discovered so late in life through immense amounts of reading. And I finally got to some kind of understanding. And here was an 18-year-old young person who was already fluent in certain ways of being and thinking. And I found that absolutely admirable. And I found that she was bringing the experiences to the things she was reading. So I wanted to ask Olivia, what were some of the things that you were reading over the course of the year?
Some of the books that I had with me while traveling in Paris, I actually had one of Luis Moreno Ocampo. It's called War or Justice. And he was one of the things that he talks about in his book is the way in which our current law system is based in something that happened was like with the Roman Empire. It was birthed with the Roman Empire, Roman law. And the way other fields of knowledge or other areas of knowledge are developing so fast, and we get new things every single week, every single month, new inventions. So this book, it was related to this, a bit like we are something so important at our present time, like our economic and social system, it's something based on something that happened so many years ago. How is it possible that something that determines so many things in our world is not adapting as well and going with this? Which I think also is something, a thought that I had in mind from what I was reading in this book. And with these conversations in the Amazon, with Martin as well, we should also adapt our system and question ourselves the way we perceive nature. So this is, for example, just one of the books that I was reading.
My follow-up is like, did anyone give you that book to read? I think one thing at Baret is that, there's no there's no required reading. There'll be recommended reading, and in Delhi, I'll take you to a bookshop and I'll buy everyone a book. But, there's no homework as such, and there's no recommended reading. There's no final exam. In your opinion, without those structures or frameworks, how does learning, people would expect that very little learning happens, but what is it that you found happened for you?
So I think it's something that I knew it was going to come with taking a gap year, but it was not a weird feeling, but a very new feeling. Already being in New York City, starting this program, and then all of a sudden I find myself, what do I want to do? I have time. So you go through this process of asking yourself, what are the things that I enjoy doing? What are the things that I'm interested in getting to know when I'm not being told by someone else what to do? So that leaves so much space and so much room to follow your interest, to maybe, yes, it's not with a curriculum, but I have the chance of, oh, wait, this happened today in New York City. I visited a museum and there's this art piece that I really, really liked. Let me find out a bit more about who this artist is, where was he born, what was he doing throughout his life. You have that freedom. And of course, as well, with what Chris has mentioned, and you've mentioned as well, the capstone projects that students have been developing throughout the year, Baret has such an inspiring cohort. And just maybe one night you find yourself having dinner with your friends and you're just randomly talking about colonization in Kenya, and you get to learn a bit more about that. And then you're like, wait, this topic interests me. Do you have any recommendations? And maybe this person is very passionate about that, and they can recommend you a book that you can read about the topic. So it leaves so much room to learn the things you're interested in and to explore these things as well.
Yeah.
Olivia, I had a follow-up question on that. So you were in 7 of the great cities of the world. Did you develop, as you went along, kind of a method of exploring those cities? And can you, in other words, did you attack it in a certain way? Give us a sense of that.
I think I really allowed myself to improvise depending on the city, but it's true that I was able to quickly notice I really, really enjoy walking. And of course, that's something that you cannot do in every city we were in. But whenever I had the chance of walking, that was my favorite way of exploring the cities. Because I think whenever you take, if it's public transport, if it's more like buses or maybe the tram, you still see the city and you can notice how you build kind of the idea of the city and the map of the city in your head. But if you're, for example, taking more the subway, which was the case in New York City because it's huge, you have the idea of this area and then something has happened and you appear in this other area. So I think when arriving the first week in a place, it was always more kind of improvising. I would watch so many, of course, recommendations, videos, museums were always on the list. And I think it was very, very valuable as well, having the insights, because the cohort is so diverse. We had people from, I think, every of the home-based cities we were in, and students were really, really enthusiastic about sharing their city with us. So they sent us as well recommendations, things we should do in the cities. But I definitely guided myself with a bit of spontaneity. Yes, being spontaneous.
I have another question. What were some of the hard things about this, meaning that were difficult to you, challenges, or talk about those?
Okay, I think one of the things that I sometimes mention with other people, like I've said before, you have in such a 9 months, it is long, it is an amount of time, but it passed by very quickly. And fitting in 9 months so many experiences of the lifetime, I sometimes had the feeling of, how do I give all, you get used to it, and sometimes you like, it's this feeling of, I don't want to feel guilty about it, but it's true that you kind of normalize this lifestyle, and all of a sudden you're in a new place, and it's like, of course I'm in a new place, it's what Baret is about. So I think maybe not a very big challenge, but definitely one of the feelings that I was working with, giving all the value to all these experiences, the value that they deserved.
Guilherme, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask Sophia something which is related to this last question Chris asked you. Sorry, I wanted to ask Olivia this. Olivia, I spoke with a few of our students who have recently graduated, like yourself, and some of the recurring comments was that they miss their 100 brothers and sisters family now that the program has ended. And I know that for instance, one of our students, that during the winter break that his mom passed away, and a few of them traveled to Mexico to be with him at that very difficult time. And so I wanted to ask you if you could mention a thing or two about the bond that you created with unexpected people in Baret.
I think one of the friendships that was, I mean, maybe not unexpected, I really was open to meet everyone, but it's true that I was assigned with Fatma from Kenya, who is my roommate. I was assigned randomly with her as a roommate when we were in Paris. And before that moment, I had not really talked with her. I had not really had the chance of meeting her. And we stayed as roommates till the very end of the program. And she generally was one of the great discoveries in terms of people in Baret. And I remember while I was in Kenya, I stayed at her home, I met her family, I met her sister. And I think that gives you a sense as well of how valuable it is, this global network that you're building in Baret. It's not just friends who are traveling with you. You've seen the place where this person lives, you've seen the family, you've seen how there's also this culture, I would say, in Baret of opening the doors of your house, which I think is very valuable. I'm expecting as well some visits over the summer. I'm already gonna go see some friends as well next month. So there is a bond that for sure is gonna last over time, and these are lifelong friendships.
That's so cool, Olivia. Can I actually jump in with this question as well? Because I feel like a lot of my conversations have been around community, especially with students that are currently. I see a couple that will be joining, that are thinking about joining. A lot of the times they ask about what community is like in Baret. And I guess the other comparison is like, why do you think it's so different versus a university community? I mean, you haven't been to university yet, but I would, it's very hard to imagine this sort of bond being formed in college. Why is it this way in Baret?
I think the excitement with which everyone arrives when we start Baret really is a factor that helps us just bring all the positivity, bring all the energy to every single thing we're going to be doing during these 9 months. And everyone just comes with this mindset of, let me meet these people, let me connect with these people, let me get to know them. And of course, the experiences that you live on the way it's just, there's such unique things. There's not going to be many people in this world who you will have shared a trip around the globe with, who you're going to, all of a sudden, you arrive also our age, being in this particular time of our lives, and starting with New York City, and then, oh, let's explore this city, and allowing ourselves to be spontaneous, and through that, getting to know the people as well. So I think it's a bit difficult to answer because it just happens. And for me as well, I think it's very valuable. I came after graduating from UWC, an experience where I also connected very, very much with the people. And I must be honest, it was preparing myself mentally and emotionally to meet new people. I thought it was going to be harder. I came with this thought of, okay, it's going to be a bit hard to meet new people again or to feel such a strong connection, but it happens, and it did happen. And the way the program starts as well, with orientation week from the very beginning, just randomly playing cards with someone, staying for a bit longer in a conversation, being around the campfire, which I think is one of the highlights of this experience as well, just because of how beautiful it is to have that freedom of being spontaneous and exploring a place and exploring yourself and going through that transformation with people your age.
That's great. Thank you, Olivia.
Olivia, we're going back to Eagle Mountain for orientation, and
that's so nice. That's going to be so nice.
Chris, unless you have something to add, I thought we'd just open it up to some questions from everyone here. If there's any questions, you can just raise your hand or put them in the chat. So Ella asks, I want to ask, what kind of workshops or excursions did one of you personally find most transformative, and why? She knows about a couple of yours, Olivia, but she wants to hear more, maybe other than the Amazon and Kruger.
One of my favorite fellowships, which I wasn't expecting that much, because in terms of location, for me, it wasn't as far from my home country, but one of my favorite fellowships was in Antalya, in the coast of Turkey. And I think what made this fellowship very, very special is the kind of place we were staying in. So we were in this very small village in the coast, and it's a very touristic village because it was off season, there weren't as many people at all. And we were staying in these wooden cabins. It was just us. So it really was a space where there was a lot of common spaces. We're having lunch all together, dinner all together. The beach was just 2 minutes walk away. We learned so much. We had a guide with us who was explaining history, biology, politics of Turkey. So it really was a week of connecting with people, because we were just constantly together, and it was just like a very much a shared space.
Yeah. I'll add one. That sounds beautiful, and I'll add one of my favorite experiences was being in Delhi, and one of my friends who's quite a famous ecologist and naturalist took a group of Baret scholars to a park in Delhi called Lodi Gardens, and gave them kind of not a walking tour, but a tree identification workshop, teaching them how to identify the different trees around Delhi and going deep, looking very closely at leaves and barks to try and understand why these trees function in a particular way and how that relates to the temperature and the seasons and the history of the place. And how quickly so many of the students were connecting it to their own, the trees that they have back at home and all of that. And I found that to be a real kind of opening up of the city in a way that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise get. Any other questions from anyone here?
Olivia, I have one. Every weekend in the home-based cities are free for students to do side trips, either in that region or near that region. Can you talk about some of those that might have been interesting to you?
Yes, I think my first weekend trip was when we went to Rio while we were in Sao Paulo, and that was a very, very nice experience. Also, having all that part of planning a trip with your friends and then organizing it and then arriving there and starting to explore. I think it was very, very nice, a city that I really, really enjoyed. And then one of my favorite weekend trips was while we were in Nairobi. We went to Hell's Gate National Park. And I remember in my application video, Kenya was the country I was the most excited for, a huge part of it being nature, but also just culturally, historically. And I arrived in Kenya, and what I told myself, Olivia, you have to leave this country saying you made the everything you could have done and a bit more. So already for the first weekend, I was, let me do some research, let me see what we can do. And I convinced 5 friends to go camping. We went to Lake Naivasha, and we arrived there and we met this guy that stayed with us for the 2 days. And we went to bed, we woke up super early in the morning, and we went to the national park. The idea that I had of visiting national parks was with like the vehicle, there's kind of a barrier between you and what you're seeing. But this national park didn't have predators. There were no lions or dangerous animals. So you could just bike through the national park, which was something I had never heard of. So we arrived super early in the morning. The sun was coming out. There was no one in the national park. We were the only ones. We were just biking. And then as we followed this super beautiful path, some zebras start crossing. There's a giraffe in the distance. There's antelopes as well. That was, I think, my favorite weekend trip.
Oh, which I think is a really good transition to Catherine's question. She said it's slightly more personal, but how did you make sure to keep up with your personal aims in such a program that is constantly full of activities?
So I think it's very important. It's very easy to just let yourself go with the flow, say yes to absolutely everything. As soon as someone tells you, let's go out and do this, say yes. But I think so I did start Baret with, of course, the mindset of being open to everything. But I think the role that fellows play on this is very important. And actually, through these conversations I would have weekly with my fellow from my house, realizing what were the things that I wanted to prioritize during this year so that I didn't forget what were my goals and ambitions. So I think it's very important, and it's part of the process of taking a gap year and doing Baret, learning to say no sometimes, even if, of course, you want to do everything, learning how to take time for yourself every now and then. It doesn't have to be staying in your room. You can go explore a park in the city, but allowing yourself to spend some time on your own as well, and to give yourself that time to remind yourself, okay, this is what I've lived so far. This is how I've done it. These are the things that I want to accomplish during the remaining months. I think that time on your own is also very valuable in a program like this one.
Olivia, who is your fellow?
I was with Revelin from Brazil. Yes.
Okay.
And would I be able to ask a question too, Olivia?
Yeah.
I'm actually quite curious. I see a couple of students that have already decided to join the program this year. For the students that are joining this year, do you have any advice for them as they set on their journey?
Okay, people who are going to be starting, I'm trying to think what is something I would have liked someone to tell me before starting this adventure. I think it's very important staying open. I know it's something that I've mentioned a lot throughout in this webinar, but staying open, because you really are going to have resources and opportunities to explore. And I think that if you start this program with just like a very strict idea on what are the things that you like, you're interested in, you're not going to be able to take as much advantage of it. So I think stay open. Maybe you know what you like, but challenge yourself a bit to change some of your preconceived ideas, to get to know different perspectives, to have conversations with people, to maybe get to learn about or have a conversation with someone who doesn't agree on a topic that you're very passionate about, or yeah, staying open. I think explore your interests. I think that's one of the main things I would say.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really cool. I know we're running up on time. Farhad, do you have any final closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to thank Chris and Olivia for joining and taking the time, and to wish Olivia the best of luck going forward. I know that we're obviously going to be in touch, but I think the way you spent your year was really inspiring. And every time I speak to you, I'm always just kind of in awe. And so everyone here is lucky to have that experience, I think, as well. So thank you, Olivia, and we will see all of you somewhere around the world. See
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.